call for that. There's a podium, you're expected to be in front of the podium, that's fine. You just learn to live with it. But find your style. Well, hi, this is Mike Howard, another edition of the Ronin Leadership Podcast. Doing this on a bright, sunny Friday morning. And I hope you all had a wonderful week. Ours was quite busy, but as always, very productive. Thanks again for all of you who have subscribed to this channel. We're continuing to grow our subscriber base, so thank you very much, and please get the word out. Also, if you haven't already done so, please pick up a copy of my first book, The Art of Ronin Leadership, which has been out for over a year. And then my second book, which is just published in August, The Art of Executing Ronin Leadership Strategies. The first book is really about my leadership journey and the overall sort of macro principles of leadership to get you on the path towards your masterless leadership journey. And the second book is really more of a how-to, how to build teams, how to execute strategies, how to build a strategy, how to have continuous improvement for your teams, and how to get the funding for all your strategic goals. And so this is more of a how-to book on for leaders to really ramp up your team's success. So I encourage you to pick up a copy of both, and you can get them at mikehowardauthor.com or, of course, on Amazon as well. And thanks again for all the feedback that I'm getting from my previous podcasts. We've had some really good guests. We've got some other great guests lined up, so just stay tuned for that. And of course, if you like this content, please hit the subscribe button. Tell your friends, family, even tell your enemies about it, because they could probably use a little bit of Ronin leadership. So I was thinking about what to talk about today. And I'm getting ready to make a speech at the local Chamber of Commerce. And in my new book, I talk a bit about public speaking. And so I thought I'd just to do a short video here for those of you who are getting ready maybe to make a speech of some sort or a presentation. I know that it's been said that public speaking is probably the number one fear of many people. For a long time, I avoided public speaking, earlier in life. Now I love it, but it was a progressive journey. So I'm gonna try to help all of you out in terms of sort of how to prepare for your next public engagement, whether you're a seasoned speaker or really this is primarily towards those people who maybe haven't done a whole lot of public speaking. Maybe this might be your first time at a major speech or a major presentation, maybe in front of your boss or what have you, your peers. And it can be very nerve-wracking for a lot of people. So preparation is always the key. I remember way back when, probably in the early 2000s, I was getting ready to make my first major speech at a security forum called The Great Conversation. It takes place every year in the Seattle area, and it is a gathering of both end users, as we call it ourselves in the security world, those people who consume the technology that security technology people actually make and deliver, and as well as a bunch of security technology folks. And it was going to be my first major speech. I would be talking in front of roughly 400 people. So it was big. It was big. And I had done some public speaking, but not to the extent like I am now. I certainly didn't have that experience at that time. So preparation. I can't emphasize that enough. You need to prepare properly. One of the things I talk about this situation in my book. where I was on the 5th floor of our headquarters building, the executive level. So I was, at that time, I was in the executive building at Microsoft on the 5th floor. And Bill Gates had just left the company to really spend full time on the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Steve Ballmer, who was his number 2, became CEO and took over his offices. Well, Ballmer's office was right down the hallway from mine. And so those offices were now vacated. So, and that you could only get in with card access, and we were security, so we could have access to it. So I remember thinking that would be a great place to practice my speech. So I had a venue. So make sure you have a place where you can practice your talk, your speech, your presentation, whatever you're about to do. The other thing is that, and this is going to be a very individualized thing for everybody, your PowerPoint deck. Because typically when you're giving a speech of some sort, not always, I've done enough speeches where I don't use a deck because I'm talking about something extemporaneously. I don't need visuals or something written, but many times you're going to be using a deck. So as you prepare your deck, or if somebody's preparing the deck for you, make sure that it's something that you're comfortable with, okay? One rule of thumb, not a whole lot of words. I hate PowerPoint decks where they put the slide up and there's like 10 bullet points and the presenter reads every bullet point. Okay, I can read what's on the slide. For you as a presenter, reading those bullet points really kind of bores everybody. After a while, you lose people. So I would say, if you have to have words in your deck, make it short and sweet. I took a lesson, my team and I actually at Microsoft, we took a lesson from Steve Jobs, who was brilliant at presentations, and he would basically use visuals. And I came to adopt that. I love that because to me, visuals, they tell a story. You may have some words on it, but not many. But the idea is that you can use those visuals to then reinforce whatever teaching points, whatever things you're trying to get across on that slide. You don't have to write 10 bullet points and read 10 bullet points. Folks who do that are trying to obviously get information across, but they're not doing it in the way that's going to capture someone's attention. Right? You end up boring people. So remember that as you're developing your slide deck, make sure it's individualized to you, your style of presentation. The other thing is that when and I'm getting a little bit granular here, so bear with me. Those of you who have used PowerPoints understand that there's a way you can put the PowerPoint on the screen, but you could have, at your laptop, you could have notes, right? If you need notes, or you can have handwritten notes if that suits you. For me, I didn't like to use a lot of notes because I'd have to pay attention to the visual and what I'm trying to get across, looking at the notes. It just didn't work for me. It's too much going on. And I tend to be real detailed in my notes, and I didn't want to do that. Kind of gets me off track. There are other people that love notes, want to have those notes there. So that's built into PowerPoint. But I would say, again, probably the best thing to do if you're going to use notes is just some generalized thoughts that help keep you on track with whatever emphasis you're trying to gain on that particular slide that you have up on the screen. But make sure that you're cognizant of the time frame. If it's an hour presentation, if it's 45 minutes, if it's a 45-minute presentation, you don't want to have 25 slides, right? Maybe 10. Because you want to have enough time, obviously, for some Q&A. You want to make sure you get through your slide deck with good flow, right? You don't want to be scrambling, looking at the clock, because usually, there's a timer usually, or you see the clock on the wall, or if you're giving a professional speech, then usually there's either a clock in the back that's counting down, right? And that's telling you that you need to speed it up, right? So you want to make sure that your flow is good so that you're not scrambling at the end to try to get through the last few slides so that you can finish off your deck. So just be cognizant of the time frame that you have and how many slides you actually need to get your points across. And so as you're building your deck, as you're individualizing it for yourself, if you're deciding whether or not to use notes or no notes, some bullet points, but not like 10, 15 bullet points on a slide. And then think about maybe using a lot of visuals to reinforce the teaching point you're trying to get across. So getting back to my preparation for the great conversation, I used Steve Ballmer's old office. And what I did was I found 3 boxes, right? And I painted smiley faces on all 3 boxes. And I put one left of center, one in center, right of center. That was my audience, okay? Those are the people I was gonna talk to in terms of my practicing my speech. Then once the deck was built, and I had, obviously I was lucky enough to have a team to talk to about what I wanted to get across, and they built me a deck and we kind of refined it over a period of time until I got it down to how I liked it. And so then I would go by myself into that room, make sure it was locked, have my laptop up, I'd have a timer, right? And put the PowerPoint up, and then I would start the process of practicing. And a couple things I was doing here. Number one, I was getting familiar with the deck. The last thing you want to do is have a deck and never look at it until just before you're making a speech. That's dumb, really. You want to make sure you prep several times before. You don't have to. At some point, you'll be comfortable with the deck. You'll know when you're ready to present it. Some people may take 10 times practice, sometimes 5 times. It depends, but just practice. So that's what I was doing. I was familiarizing myself with the content of the deck and making sure that it worked. And as I was going through the deck, if I found that, okay, I actually need to take out a bullet point or I needed to add something here, this is a good time to refine it. So turn the timer on, and then I started speaking. And one of the things I made sure to practice was not just looking straight ahead. You have an audience, and that audience is not just in front of you, the audience is all around you, right? In front, to the sides. So I made sure I was cognizant about looking center as I'm talking, then looking left of center, and then going back to center, and then maybe right of center, and you don't want to make it like a robotic movement. At some point, it's natural. It just becomes natural that you're talking to an audience, blah, 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 and then you're emphasizing here, and then you're looking over here, but you want eye contact with your audience. Number one, it's good protocol for making a speech. Number two, you want to see what the reaction is from the audience. Are you coming across to them, or are they looking at their watch or their phone or something, right? If they're engaged, that's a good thing. If they're not, okay, then maybe the next slide will get their attention. Who knows? But you want to make sure you stay cognizant of that. And then I made sure the time frame, right? If it looked like that I was lagging too much on one deck and I was running out of time, then I would know after more practice to get through that particular slide faster so that I could, make sure I got through the deck within the allotted 45-minute period, which would give me 10 to 15 minutes of Q&A, because that's what they baked into the program. But this is something you need to make sure you do to prepare yourself. Know the time frame that you have. Use the deck as a way of refining your talk, determining what belongs, what doesn't belong. If you need the notes, if you don't need the notes, I didn't need notes. And so I don't really use them, but I know my boss at Microsoft used to love to use notes, and that was great because it worked for him, right? So you have to find your own style. The other thing that you need to be cognizant of, especially if you're making a speech of some sort, is what kind of speaker are you? There are certain speakers that love standing behind podiums with a microphone. It gives them a sense of comfort having that there, or that maybe they could put notes up there. I don't like podiums, but obviously, depending on the venue, you may have to speak in front of a podium. Personally, I like to be mic'd up and I like to walk around. I like to walk around because for me personally, it's my style. I can engage better with the audience. Moving around also keeps the blood flowing for me, and so I don't feel like I'm just standing there, just still, and moving around really works for me. It works for a lot of people, but other people, they like being behind a podium because it's in their comfort zone. So you find the style that's right for you, but just remember that there'll be times when if you like to walk around, you won't be able to because the venue doesn't call for that. There's a podium, you're expected to be in front of the podium. That's fine. You just learn to live with it. But find your style. And so as I was prepping for this speech, I would do it almost on a daily basis. Some days I couldn't make it, but I would practice until I got to the point where I was very comfortable with it. I had the timing right. I knew to look left, center, right. I had kind of my style, starting to work on my style. Remember, I was young at this speech thing, but I got to the point where I was comfortable. So that's where you need to get to in your individual preparation for a presentation, a speech, what have you, is practice to the point where you are comfortable. You're comfortable in your own skin, you're comfortable with the content, you're comfortable with the cadence of your speech, and then again, you're using this time also to refine that deck. So if there are things that you thought worked, and as you started practicing, you find out, that's not working, don't be afraid to take the slide out or modify it or whatever. If you need to add a slide, that's fine, but remember your time constraints. So by the time I got to the great conversation, was I nervous? Yeah, I was nervous. Everybody gets a little nervous before you make a speech. Now, the more speeches you do, the more talks you do, it's a different kind of nervous. Back then it was like, you're nervous because you don't want to screw up and you don't want to say the wrong things, and you hope the audience kind of clicks with you and absorbs what you have to tell them. Nowadays, it's not so much nervous because I'm nervous. It's more like I want to get on with it. I want to get out there and do my thing and talk to the audience about things that I'm passionate about. So it's not a nervous like it was back then. It's a different kind of. Maybe nervous is not even the right word, but it's more of I'm anxious. I want to get out there. I want to do it. So when I finally got out there, I remember over the years I've joked with Phil Aronson and Ron Werman, the two folks, my great friends. A lot of you know them in the security world, but if you're not in the security world, they're great leaders in the security industry, and they really put on the great conversation. I told them that the stage initially looked like it was this big, like it was so huge, like this big, right? And as they asked me to come back year after year to speak, the stage seemed like this, it was this big. The stage was the same size. My comfort level had increased to the point where that stage didn't look so daunting. And that'll happen for you too. The more you work on your craft of public speaking engagements, the more that stage won't look as daunting. I finished the speech, had some good Q&A, which always is another barometer. Like if you ask anybody have any questions or anything and it's dead silence, either you've done such a great job that you stunned them that they really don't know what to say, or maybe the content wasn't as good as you thought it was going to be, and so they really don't know what to ask or didn't really care to ask questions. But typically you'll get a few questions, which is great. I actually love the Q&A session better than the presentation, and most people who have done a lot of public speaking like I have will tell you the same thing. The presentation, that's great. We love doing the presentation because we want to present ideas. We want people to learn from what we have to tell them. But the Q&A is always oops, sorry, I almost dropped my mic there. The Q&A is really the icing on the cake, because that's where you really get to engage with the audience, and it's totally unscripted. And so you may be hit with questions that, wow, I didn't know where that came from. And that helps you mentally too, in terms of engaging with the audience. And the other thing is just be yourself. I remember as I was getting ready for the great conversation and doing all my practicing, I would also look at videos of people I thought were great speakers. You know, people like, you know, Barack Obama and John Kennedy, and you know, just a lot of people who know how to make speeches and can lift up an audience. Martin Luther King. But the idea is to not emulate them, kind of see what worked for them, how their style was, see if there's anything you can incorporate, but you still have to be yourself, right? So don't try to be somebody that you're not. Just do your thing, be comfortable in your own skin, and you'll be just fine. So I had pretty good reviews from that first engagement. The audience apparently, you know, they do reviews, and they love the content, and I got really good feedback from both Ron and Phil as well, and so much so that they invited me, like I said, you know, year after year. But it was really the start of my journey of public speaking. And as we engaged in going to GSX or ISC West, major security conferences, and I was asked to be on panels or asked to give speeches, or as I traveled around the world and made presentations to my teams overseas, or sometimes we belong to this organization called OSAC, Overseas Advisory Council. It's a State Department public-private sector partnership. And a lot of times when I'm traveling overseas, visiting my team, visiting our stakeholders, I would be asked to speak at the U.S. Embassy to U.S. business people who are, you know, doing that public-private sector partnership with the State Department, diplomatic security. So I present to them too. But my point is that over a period of time, I started presenting a lot. And the more I did it, the more I became comfortable. The more comfortable I became, the more I really loved it. And now, you know, it's not daunting. I love doing it. You will get to that point too, in varying degrees. But I would encourage you, obviously, at a basic level, foundational level, is the practice, the preparation, and making sure that when you are ready to step up in front of that, in front of your boss and your peers, in front of an audience at a conference, speaking to a board of directors, whatever the situation is, you're ready, you're prepared. And that preparation actually helps you with your anxiety level. Knowing your material. The worst thing is if you got to make a speech, you're anxious about public speaking anyway, and you don't know your material. That's a recipe for disaster. So just prepare adequately, thoroughly, and you'll be fine. And then I would just encourage you to do what I do, is to study. Look at other people that you admire, respect from a leadership perspective as they make speeches. You know, watch videos, go to YouTube, take a look at people and see their style and see how they interact. Oh, the other thing is, I almost forgot, humor. So there's two types of humor in making speeches. The first one is a speech, you know, somebody comes to make a speech and they may do an icebreaker where they tell a joke, a funny story, and everybody laughs and it kind of, you know, hey, now we're ready to rock and roll with the presentation. That's not me. I am not a good joke teller. I'm not a good storyteller. So my humor comes extemporaneously. So as I'm giving a speech, if something funny strikes me that I think that would resonate with the audience, especially if it's self-deprecating, I'll throw it out there, and usually gets a chuckle or something like that. That's my style. If I were to try to get out there and tell a joke or a story as an icebreaker, it would fall flat because that's just not my style. I'm not comfortable. Other people are really good at it. Me, I just like to do things off the cuff. And for me, that's more natural for the way I talk. So as you are refining the craft of public speaking, make sure that, you kind of figure out, what is your style when it comes to humor, because humor is important. It keeps things light. So as you're going through your speech, it could be a serious topic too. There are times I was talking about terrorism or crisis management or what have you. So these aren't, haha kind of topics. But you can sort of ratchet down the tension level with some, with some levity, with some humor. And it also humanizes you to the audience. And so find your own style of humor, over time practice it. And then one last thing I want to leave you with. The audience is not your enemy. And I think a lot of times when people are afraid of public speaking, it's simply because they're afraid that they're going to look stupid or the audience is going to think they're stupid. And look, the audience is there for a reason. They're there because they want to learn something. They want to hear from you. You have something to tell them, right? Even if they've known you for a long time, like the folks in the security industry, there were things that I could still tell them, hopefully impart upon them that would make them better at their jobs. But at the same time, when you're doing the Q&A, I, as the speaker, will learn things that I didn't know. So everybody comes out of that session, hopefully, in a win-win situation where you come back with more knowledge, you're smarter than you were before you came in. So keep it in your head that the audience is not your enemy. They don't want to do you harm. They are there to learn, to listen, and hopefully to grow. And you're there to impart information to them. Next week, when I talk to the Chamber of Commerce, these are all seasoned business people, a lot of seasoned leaders. I'm going to talk about leadership, but I'm going to talk about leadership from my optic, my journey, and the things I think are important. And some of the things I'm sure they already know, but there are things I guarantee you that they don't, because if they did, there would be no need for leadership books. There'd be no need for me to give a speech about leadership, because leadership is a continuous journey. It never ends. And I always say it in my books. I say the day you think you know everything about leadership is the day you start to regress as a leader. So when I go next week to talk to the folks at the chamber, they're there to listen and to learn and to grow. And then we have this conversation afterwards, the Q&A. And everybody comes out of there, hopefully with more knowledge than we had before. And so just remember that, okay? So I would be very interested to hear feedback on this podcast from you as you are going through your own journey of making speeches or presentations or what have you. Your journey is going to be really important for me, and I can't wait to hear it. So this is a call to action for all of you to make sure that you get back to me as to your own journey on public speaking. So that's it for this edition of the Ronin Leadership Podcast. As always, I always encourage you to send feedback on the podcast. Give me suggestions on people that you are interested in having on the podcast, and we'll see what we can do. Also, click that subscribe button. Tell your friends and family and everyone you know about the Ronin Leadership Podcast. If you haven't done so already, you can get my book on Amazon.com, both on Kindle and in hard copy, paperback, I should say, or at MikeHowardAuthor.com. So until next time, hope you have a wonderful week. Continue to improve your leadership acumen, and in this particular case, continue to improve your ability to make speeches, presentations, be comfortable talking in front of people, and have fun with it. Till next time, we'll see you.